to the clock.
Thank you.
Hi, Emma. Sorry, I don't have the hosting credentials, so I can't admit anyone. So if you want me to help with that meeting, can you give me co-host? So
I
that
did.
can... Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like you're co-hosting.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Hi.
Okay.
Right, Sara DeSilvey, what time do you need to hop off?
I think I'm going to be good for at least until 10 of. I
Okay.
carve space and time in my clinic day.
Okay, really appreciate it.
Just left a well child check, COPD at 5:40.
I hope all of your patients will be fine.
Yeah,
So
I
we
think
can
we're
have
good.
you for 50 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. CDS. Who might that be? Brent?
You're right, Karen. The CDS is Bren. Hi, Bren.
Hello. Yes, I'm clinical decision support. Sorry.
It's interchangeable. When you hear Brent Rhodes, you think clinical decision support. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. So welcome, everybody. This is Patient Care Work Group meeting, and we have folks from the Gravity team, as well as RTI and other interested people on this call. But before we start, we just have to direct everybody to the HL7 antitrust policy. So I'll just give everyone a second or two to read that. All right. So our agenda for today is really to talk about the Fire Goal resource and specifically how the Gravity project is using the Fire Goal resource. So Sara DeSilvey, we have a few slides that we prepared for how MCC is using the Goal resource. And then Emma also, Emma, how would you describe your spreadsheet? Emma put together a spreadsheet, just identifying, cross-comparing a little bit more specifically.
Sorry, Karen, I was on mute. I
Yeah.
did sort of like a detailed analysis comparing the data elements against US core, by the way, as well, so that, you know, from an implementation standpoint, we can see where the differences are and where, you know, from an MCC perspective, where we may want to add profiling versus rely, you know, depend on US core and compare it to Gravity as well at the same time. So, you know, that way we take into consideration both of those implementation guides.
Yep. So Emma,
Can I-
yeah,
oh.
go ahead.
Can I ask a question? So one of the things, so I was Monique invited to this? I mean, I'm sure Emma can represent the Gravity tech approach, but I just want to make sure that we have, because as it stands right now, we have Gravity terminology on the call, but not Gravity tech.
I don't think we invited Monique.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just want to make sure that Emma can more than pinch hit, but I do want to acknowledge the fact that I do have terminology, non-fire bias in my own perspective. I mean, in my own, I should say limitation. So representing the complexities of the resource itself will be, it's not as robust as one might be able to represent if we had the representatives from the technical team.
Yeah, we didn't, I don't think we invited Monique, but if it's something that we need to explore with the Gravity team, we can certainly, we listen in on the Gravity call because patient care is Gravity sponsoring work group as well. So if
Correct, yeah.
we need a community, you know, collaborate with the Gravity technical team, we can do that.
That sounds great. Okay. And this sounds like a lovely agenda. I was mistakenly picking up the thread from where we were at last time, and so I'm here to help. Whatever I had to present was specifically regarding the finalization of our terminology approach, which of course is embedded within the Gravity IG approach because it was built to align with that. But I think that probably we'll just run off this agenda, and if whatever slides I have are helpful, we can go forward with that.
Okay. So Emma, do you want to go through the MCC views first, and then we can pivot to Sarah's and then have the conversation, or?
Yeah, so maybe we can go to just the beginning part. You want to start there, or you want to?
We can just jump straight to here unless anybody like a more thorough discussion on how we're profiling or restructuring our IG.
And this is the same, we presenting how the last meeting we had, we did review the restructuring. So, but if anybody would like a refresher, we can do that as well. But in the context of time, if we go specifically to go to the goal resource that we're talking about today. So basically, we can start there. And if there's any questions, we'll be happy to clarify as we move along. Okay. So currently, remember that the resource was already the MCC resource, we're updating it. So we're making changes to how it is currently profiled. And what we do have in there is there's a couple, some extensions, a total of 3 existing extensions on the resource. So there's an ability to be able to say goal acceptance, which we have in the IG as a must support currently. And then also, goal reason to reject, which is a must support. And goal relationship, and this is where a goal is related to another goal. Within that relationship, we need to be able to say which goal is the target, and that would be the other goal. And then also, in the goal type, the relationship type. For that one, we meaning the the care planning community as well as the IG MCC need to define a value set. It could be an example find a value set, but so we need to be able, we don't have a defined concept right now for that. We also are introducing barriers. During the last technical connected time, we had long conversations about goal barriers and as well as goal protective factor. These are new extensions that are currently being built, and it will be a patient care extension that can go across that can be extend goal as well as other request type resources that may have barriers, barrier to a service request, a barrier to, immunization request, that kind of thing.
Emma, can I ask a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
The 2 extensions, goal acceptance and goal reason rejected, are the contexts applied to the patient only, or is there is the context extended beyond the patient?
The concept is on the goal, and the goal resource requires a patient out of the base spec.
Okay, so
patient reference 1.
Right, so by inference, so the acceptance and reason rejected, the context is set to patient, is that correct?
Yes, it has
Okay,
to be on the goal, and the goal have to have a patient. from what I say. I have to have a subject. Whether the subject is patient or group-based resource will determine that. The required from our profiling perspective, currently right now, required elements are life cycle status and description as well as subject. And then we also have must support on some other elements as well. And I have them listed on the screen. From a value set perspective, these are the elements within the profile resource right now that can have value sets. And if we choose to define value sets, similar to how Gravity would define a value set, define a value set, collection of value sets, we can place value sets on these different elements. The reason rejected has a codable concept right now on there with an example, I believe. And then the relationship type does not have a value set. And this is the conversation from the app perspective that Dave and I have been having is if we do a goal related to another goal, we need to be able to specify what type of relationship those two goals have to each other. For the goal barrier and the protective factor, we meaning patient care work group owns this extension, and we have a example value set that we put in there, and example value sets can be extended, as well as and Bob is here from Gravity, and as well as the protective factor. That new reference will have a value set, example value set to go with that. So Karen, do you want me to take sharing over so I can show the spreadsheet with the comparison? And Monique is coming in as well. Sorry. So when we did a comparison, and for right now, I'm going to start off comparing.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I will start off comparing what's in US core, the updated US core, and what's in how we have MCC currently, and then also talk a little bit about some of the changes we might need to do when we profile goal for MCC. After I review this, if I'll take a few minutes to do that, then I'll pull in how Gravity aligns. Okay, so currently right now, as I called out in the previous slide, these are the extensions that are on goal. There's 5 of them, 3 existing, and then 2 new ones, which would be the barrier and the protective factor. These are optional extensions, and we can decide if we want to make those must support within the profile when we profile. With the goal acceptance, this is the value set that's in there. I'm sorry, this is the extension right now. And there's a priority element on it, there's a status element, and then there's the individual element where you can reference a provider or a patient to see who's accepting the goal, the status of the goal acceptance and the priority. And the priority right now has a example binding on that value set. It's like 3 values, high, low, and moderate, I think is what it is. Within the goal rejected, again, there is a quotable concept on the value, and this is, we need to specify if example values, we meaning patient care or the implementation guide as part of the profiling, example values on that element, we'll be able to do that. The relationship, can you see the gray out part? I grayed it out because these are things that we have to fix. It's not in the existing profile as it exists right now. So this is the relationship type where we need to specify a type to put on there, value set type to put on there as part of profiling. And these are the barriers and the protective factors. Those would be the 2 new extensions to quotable reference. So if by quotable reference, this is a new data type to fire. By quotable reference, it means it can either be a reference where the barrier can be another resource, like a condition or an observation or something, probably a patient, maybe, or caregiver or provider, or it can be a code. And within the code, because it's a codable concept, there's a text element, so it doesn't have to be a coded barrier. It can be a text, barrier that's represented in text. The same goes with our protective factor. Goal life cycle status is required. So far right now is required for US core, I believe, and it's also required in MCC. Achievement status is must support in MCC. US core is silent about achievement status. Description, goal description is required by both US core and MCC. You must have a subject, and the subject in both references the US core patient profile. Goal that target is must support in US core, must support in MCC, and is really target measure. Currently, from what I understand, there was some consideration of creating a value set for the measure target measure, but we may not do that. We might, make that more flexible and not have a value set for that. Another thing that is must support the due date for US core and for MCC, and MCC is also addressing a must support on expressed by who's expressing this goal, patient, provider, or caregiver, and then also addresses this must support. So when I take this and I include reference to gravity, so I'm gonna
I have a quick question. So what is the life cycle status? What does that represent?
Is the status of the goal. Like a lot of fire resources have the status element on a goal, whether it's active, it's completed, that kind of that's the status of the goal.
Life status, that's the life status?
Yeah, I think the element is called life cycle status.
Life cycle status, okay, got it, thanks.
Yeah, so when I lay SDOH against US core and MCC, the only difference that I see when I say the only difference, where SDOH profiled was on the category, goal category. US core is silent on goal category, and MCC is also currently, as it existed, is silent on goal category. And I believe in SDOH IG, there's a value set for the category, the type of goal this is, type of SDOH goal this is. MCC also did slices on addresses, where MCC addresses element references the SDOH condition, SDOH observation screening response, and SDOH observation assessment. And then also SDOH supported outcome reference uses SDOH observation screening response and SDOH observation assessment. Those are where SDOH, did specific, and these three different elements were where SDOH did specific profiling. But other than that, there's not much of a difference from what's in US core. Any questions so far? Any surprises or any red flags? And I also took a look at, we're also taking a look at the search parameters or the search queries from US core. So US core wants, you can get a goal by patient, and description. This was an interesting one because this is in the newest version of US core. Patient care does not have description as a search parameter, so we have a JIRA ticket to add description as a search parameter. And then get patient by life cycle status, so you can get all the active goals for this patient or all the completed goals, that whatever the value set is. And then there's also get goal by patient and date. And one of the things that MCC may possibly do is get goal by patient and addresses, so to be able to query for all the conditions that are addressed by this goal, that kind of query, all the observations that are addressed by this goal. One thing that we may possibly do with MCC is also get goal by patient and achievement status in order to see all the goals, all the goals that have been completed, or all the active goals, or all the goals that are in progress. And that's some of the questions that we have in the app as far as the app goes right now. Should we show only active goals, or should we show goals that are in progress?
Hey, Emma, this is Bob. I have a question. Codable reference, is that actually something that's available in R4?
It's in R5.
Okay, so we can't really use that as a data type.
Well,
right now.
But isn't our, if we do where, remember you, I think that was my better comment on SUH about using R5 elements. If we use, we can, and that your feedback to me, Bob, was we can use it to test the spec and to see if it's something that's doable. But I believe, I think it was medication request, so some other resource uses codable reference.
I think it's in 4B. My comment was there's a process for taking changes in elements from R5 back into R4, which is what we did. I'm not aware that there is an equivalent process for pre-adopting a data type. We probably just need to check on that.
This was actually a recommendation from Lloyd, because with this whole codex, the barrier and the protective factor, we've had lots of conversations. At first, we wanted a profile and observation. So went to a fire workflow with that, and they were pushing back, no, not to do that. And then we also went, talked a little bit with OO about that. And they didn't think that we should be able to do that. And that's how come we ended up with an extension. And our criteria was that we need this extension to also be queryable. So we need such parameters to be able to query for all the barriers, goals.
Okay, sure.
So this has been work that we've been discussing and working with Lloyd on in order for us to be able to.
And Lloyd's indicating you can pre-adopt an R5 data type.
Yes.
That's interesting. Okay, thank you.
I think that in that case, you can pre-adopt that R5 extension because codable reference is in R4B. I don't think in general you could pre-adopt a data type like that unless you had some mapping. Too. Yeah, I think it's a special case because R4B did introduce codable reference.
And since our
does, but he needed to get some books.
But if we're limiting ourselves to R4.0.1 and US Core 3.1.1, then we couldn't do that as part of what we have right now. We could only do it when we move to R4B. Okay, all right.
That would be my, unless there's some mechanism for transforming that data type that's part of that pre-adoption mechanism that I'm not aware of.
No, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
Did you take a look at the search parameters that we're supporting in SUH?
Did I take a look at this? There weren't, because I think I asked you about search parameters in SDOH, I believe
they're in the capability statements, right?
Yeah, they're in the capability statements. There weren't any specified search parameters in SDOH, and I believe the response to that were the SDOH was using the search parameters from US Core, and they were waiting for implementers to let SDOH know if there were additional search parameters that they would use.
Okay. I'll double check on that because I thought we had specified some, but you may be right. That's something that Lloyd did.
Yeah, because when I know when I did data analysis, sorry, I'm pulling up the wrong thing. With SDOH, I did use, put in that some of the US Core search parameters that people need to be, can be mindful of that they may be able to use. But SDOH didn't have specific. search parameters that I can remember. Any questions so far? Any other questions?
Oh, actually, we do, because there are search parameters in the capability statements that are not part of US Core, such as service request. So there are some there. We just need to make sure that we cover them and make sure that they're, now for what you're looking at for goal, that may be true. Okay, so you're saying for goal, we have the same search parameters as US Core. Fair enough.
As far as I can tell, yes. At least that was what I was.
That makes sense.
So,
okay, thanks.
So even if when I go to the care coordination platform capability statement, and I go to goal, if there is any,
Yeah, click under.
So on search, and that was
So
the
that's
one
the
for
set
goal.
right there.
Yeah, so these right here, when I asked about, these are the parameters, but when I asked about the search queries, that was when I said, they said use US Core.
Those are all US Core brought forward. Okay, that's fine. I would think life cycle status wouldn't have been there in US Core.
Yes,
Life cycle.
US Core didn't have achievement status, but I believe it had, I can pull up US Core as well.
That's the one. It didn't have achievement status. Okay.
Yeah, because when I looked at US Code, I didn't see that they added description as a new parameter for goal. Content. They added description as new content.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions so far?
No,
So
did you
as
have
far
any
as-
for me? I have to drop.
No, I didn't have any. Sarah or anybody else, any questions for the SDOH alignment for Bob?
I brought in, I pinged the tech team, and so Bob and Monique swooped in. So I have no questions for them.
And unfortunately, I have to swoop out, so I'm swooping.
Thank you, Bob. Monique remains on the call, though. I just wanted to make sure that we had a team that could represent any questions you might have. So thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Sarah. Bye.
Thank you. So as far as when I reviewed, as far as I can see, I don't think there is anything that, is that contradicts any of these three profiles. US Core doesn't slice category, and MCC hasn't sliced category either. SDOH does to specify SDOH specific categories. Other than that,
Excellent job as always, Emma. Thank you for laying this all out so plainly.
thank you. So for the patient care folks, we will need meeting. And is Dave on the call? Dave Carlson?
Yes, he is.
I'm here. Yes, Emma.
We've got multiple Daves as per usual.
Great.
Okay, Dave Carlson. So on this type that we need a value set for
The relationship type.
relationship type.
Yeah, when we looked at I guess in US Core, it was just, there wasn't even an example. There was no default value sets at all. So I guess that's a question, how strong the value set do we think is warranted here? We want an example, a preferred. I don't know if we're in a position to have something as strong as an extensible value set, unless we have very specific type of relationships that we want to assure are used. But if we do, we probably need something like an extensible value set for that.
And I can do a JIRA ticket and put it on Michelle's list of trackers to see if it's something that we can define. And as I do that, I will also look into CDA to see if there is a because I do know in CDA, you can reference one goal to another goal to see if there's a type of any kind of value set that's used there that would be in VSAC.
If we have a value set, is that part of a profile within the MCC implementation guide?
And if I go into patient care, I'm hoping it would be a profile. Let me pull up the extension. So it will be a profile that will go in, because right now the profile is completely silent.
It is. I wonder who owns that that profile with that value set?
I think patient care does.
Well, patient care does, but is it something you'd propose onto the base goal spec, or is it something? Okay, that's what I'm wondering. Where does it fall within the stack profile?
So I think right now it's on goal. So.
But part of the base spec or in a profile on goal?
It's a profile on. It's a base. It's a profile on the goal resource in the.
So then who owns that profile?
So this, when I go to a relationship, is owned by patient care.
It's an extension, not a profile, right?
Extension is owned by patient care.
Oh, it isn't. It's an extension. Got it. Okay. So we're suggesting that the value set is added to this. We'll call it a core extension. The extension is part of the base spec. The extension itself is not. We're not.
There is one. Core relationship type, and it's extensible.
Oh, we were looking in the wrong place when we looked at it before.
Yeah, I think we were looking under the summary structure. But if you go to full structure, there is a goal relationship type.
And it's extensible. Okay.
Yeah, and this is milestone, replacement, and other. We might not have description and search parameters.
Emma and Dave, can you give me an example of a goal that has a relationship to another goal?
So look at that value set, Emma, that just pulled up. You can go back to value set. One of them was milestone. So I think it's that one goal A relates to goal B. And so that's the questions to the target, I guess, then is a milestone. So I'm trying to think the direction of that relationship. So I think what's kind of implied here is that goal B is a milestone for goal A.
So,
sorry.
No, I was gonna say I know when we talked about this in patient care, the whole patient who broke their hip that wanted to dance at their daughter's wedding, where the physical therapist goal might be, I just want you to be able to walk 10 feet or be able to walk to the bathroom. The patient goal would be, my daughter's getting married, in 2 months, and I want to be well enough to dance at her wedding. So that overarching goal, or that big goal, the dance to the wedding goal would be the milestone goal.
Even something much more common, be like weight loss. Weight loss might be to lose, let's say, 50 pounds over the next 9 months, let's say. And then there are milestones along the way for increments. But the broader goal, the longer term goal still remains.
And a good SDR example would be, for instance, like the overall goal is employment. So that's the milestone goal. You have a target goal of completing your basic skills training, right? So the goal is the milestone goal is being employed. The target goal for right now is completing your basic skills training course, right?
Yeah.
But I'm hearing it the other way though, that the target of the relationship is the milestone, which is the smaller piece of the overarching goal, right?
Oh, sorry. Yes, the target goal is. I'm looking at the definition. The target goal is considered to be a piece. You're correct, Jay, that is the way I would understand it. But the target goal is considered to be a piece of attaining this goal.
This being the goal containing the extension or right?
Yeah, so if it's described, it depends on where the relationship is going, but you're correct. The milestone is a piece, is a step. Well, actually, no, I'm going to take it back because the description is confusing me, the definition.
It is.
I think there's a target element in here. So let's look at this, right? So that's the goal. Okay, so there is the type. That's what we're talking about. Where is the value on the type can be that value set where one of them is milestone. But then you can also point to the extent that you can also point to a target.
Which is required. So if you have this relationship extension, both the type and the target are required, which makes sense. You can't point to a relationship and not say anything about what kind of relationship it is, nor can you have a relationship that has a type but doesn't have a target. They're both required.
So let's see how they define target. So in target,
probably any kind of resource. Well, no, it should be a goal, actually, if it's
right.
Yeah.
And then there's value, and then there's target, a goal the relationship exists with. So it doesn't tell you whether it's the.
I think we get the relationship though, right?
Yeah, but you know, this raises interesting questions always about relationship to fire resources. Right? We know in general we don't want relationships on both ends. You don't want A pointing to B and B pointing to A. But it raises an interesting question for me about, for at least this kind of goal relationship, to add a milestone goal, you have to modify the overarching goal to say that it now has a relationship to a milestone, as opposed to creating a milestone and having the milestone point to the overarching goal and say, I am a milestone for this goal. You know, part of my, thinking about this would, from a workflow and a process, is that the milestone should point to the overarching goal, but it's not defined that way.
So when I asked Lloyd about this, he always tells me that the thing that came first always points to the thing that comes second.
Okay.
So if losing the 5 pounds will come first, then it will point to the losing of the 50 pounds.
Well, no, but what came first was losing 50 pounds. That was the overarching goal. So you're saying losing 50 pounds came first, then I have to modify that overarching goal to point to a new milestone goal that says, now I have a milestone to lose 5 pounds within the next month.
So I thought the principle was not the thing that exists, but the thing that is recorded second point to the thing that's recorded first, so you don't have to modify the first thing.
Hey, Jay, that's what I'm getting to, but that's not the way this relationship is written.
But when you have a compositional goal that has milestones, we don't always know which one's going to be recorded first. I mean, do we say, I've got a goal of 50 pounds, and then, okay, I'm going to break that down into little bits, in which case the current design is backwards? Or do you know that it's going to be recorded as pieces? I don't know.
See, my functional mind, and I'm a functional, but not a technical thinking person. My functional mind's always saying that before I can lose 50 pounds, I got to at least lose 5 pounds. Right? But you guys are telling me that that's not how it works.
Well, no, that is the way it's written. It's written that the goal to lose 50 pounds has predetermined or has to be modified to say, I'm not pointing to my 3 milestones along the way.
Yeah, so Dave, I think from a workflow or clinical logical perspectives, what we always do is that you have an overarching goal to communicate with the patient, and then you can discuss with the patient that if this overarching goal is this big, how can then we break it down into smaller pieces, so therefore you can incrementally achieve it. I mean, say, for example, if you look at HbA1c, which is even a longer target, because any change in interventions won't result in changes in HbA1c until 12 weeks later. You generally sort of do HbA1c evaluation sort of every 12 weeks. So you will say to the patient that, look, if you want to drop the HbA1c of currently 8% to say, for example, 5%, then you have 3 percentage point to achieve. And if we do it incrementally over sort of 9 months, then you have sub goals or milestones of smaller increments, or decreases to the ultimate sort of 5%. So that's sort of the kind of clinical logical workflow type of determination. So the overarching goal comes first, and then you then have those milestone goals, and then according to fire instructions, you always have to have something that exists first points to the something that exists second. I take problem with this logic, especially when you're talking about goal and milestones. You always may want to say that, well, I also want to say that, look, this milestone goal has an overarching goal of 5%. So how do I then link it back to the overarching goal? I need to be able to do that. So my argument is that it needs to be bi-directional.
Yeah, no, thanks for the explanation, Steve. That's really helpful. But because I do agree, and I think it's, Sarah's example on employment, if I have initially to gain full-time employment, I may identify at least a milestone, but it's along the way when I don't pass a test or I don't pass a certification, I have to establish a new or maybe multiple milestones to help me get to that overarching goal. I don't know them in advance necessarily.
This is Becky. CDA. Oh, go ahead, Monique.
Go ahead, Becky.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So CDA actually has the overarching goal, and then it has sub goals that report to that. And I participated in the IAT last week, the Implementathon for CDA, and one of the examples that I worked on was actually to come up with a goal. There was an EPIC person on there who was interested in how US CDI, as it relates to social determinants of health, would map out goals. And it was me, the person from EPIC, and Jean Duteau. And the three of us worked on an example, and we just used, I think it was like a housing stability was the overarching goal. And then we came up with 2 sub goals, and they literally wrapper it all together. So I actually had a note to make a ticket against fire, because we did take a look and see how fire did it. And we noted that it was actually missing these milestones or sub goals to meet that overarching goal. So I'm not saying fire is right and CCDA is wrong or vice versa, but we might want to be consistent with how it's done with other HL7 standards that do exist.
So when you say take a look at fire, are you talking about take a look at US core social determinants of health observation? Is that what you're talking
about? No, how CDA is currently doing it, especially if the data is going to need to flow back and forth between the 2 standards at some point in time. So CDA has an overarching goal, and then you have sub goals underneath it. And it sounds to me like fire is doing it the opposite. You point the sub goal a different way to the overarching, or maybe it's the overarching, I should say, points to the sub goals.
Yeah, currently the overarching point to the sub goals.
Yeah.
Which lines up with CDA, but CDA is a document spec that takes everything as it exists at a point in time. So I'm not sure it faces the same issue with which one has to be created first.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
It's unclear to me when we talk about milestones or sub goals. For example, weight loss. Emma was saying, like, let's say we have a 6-month weight loss goal, and this is a measurable thing. Social determinants of health may be a little more difficult, but a 20-pound weight loss goal in 6 months may have several smaller goals of 5-pound weight loss in each month. When are those represented as separate goal instances, and when are they represented with the goal target element, not the extension target, but just the goal target measure? I'm still confused when we talk about milestone goals, whether they could be part of a single goal instance where they are the target. There could be multiple target goals with dates within that goal, and when they should be separate goals altogether. Yeah, go there, Emma. Thank you.
Yeah, but the target contains the code of the measure and the value. There's no dates associated with that at all. So there'd be no way to specify.
I thought there is a due date on the target.
Well, okay, interesting. There is a due date. So
but this goal doesn't reference.
Yeah, I never really considered the use case. Could I have 3 targets with 3 different due dates.
But
Use the
the-
predecessor successor model and have lose first 10 pounds and then the successor lose the next 10 pounds and then the successor.
Oh, yeah, I've never even
But you
considered
can't,
the
but you
target
can't,
date that way.
target doesn't
you can't assess them independently though.
Right.
see that there's no reference to another goal within target. Just, you know what I mean, to say my
But
target.
target is within the larger goal description. So if the larger goal description is something, you know, the goal description is something bigger, and then the target, I'm not sure this is correct, but I'm trying to understand, you know, when the goal description might be, you know, owning your own home, and the target, or, you know, no longer being homeless, and the target measures may to be first get you into a shelter, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not clear yet when these should be separate goals or when there's an overarching goal in the goal description and the target element here is used to show progression and you can move achievement status.
I think the fact that the status is on the outside means that that would be the discriminator. You would only put multiple things in a target if you knew you were going to evaluate them at the same time. Does that make sense?
But you can't put improving, you can't move that achievement status along. That's my second question. I don't know when a new instance is created, or, you know, if a goal is finished and, you know, it's improving, or if you could be moving that along and say not changing, improving, et cetera, with
So we
different
look at-
timestamps on each.
So think about this as if you think about this as being the little goal, you know, the 5-pound goal.
What will have the greatest impact?
And then it's the extension, because extension has a target as well. So does that mean, then why, if the thing that is supposed to be pointing to something else, so wouldn't it be on the thing that's supposed to do the pointing? Because it's the extension, the target that is targeting?
Yeah, I wasn't even sure when you use the extension to point to a target and when you use the regular target on the backbone goal. It's all a little unclear to me.
The target in the goal resource is meant to target like a specific number or a measure or some kind of result, whereas the extension targets another resource. A goal resource.
But deciding which one of those things to use, whether to create a new resource or just put another target in there, I think is the question Monique's asking, right?
Yes. Yes, it's not, and you know, we think of this was all sort of structured originally around labs where, you know, there were measurables, but we could substitute for a codable concept, you know, a SNOMED code, like they're now stably housed in a shelter or something if we're trying to move out of homelessness.
So it says allows the progress of the goal to be monitored against an observation or due date.
Right, and so those observations could be incremental findings that are slightly better than the current state, you know, so it's still unclear to me.
So then it says all targets must be met for the overall goal to be met.
Right. So if there's a goal of, you know, of owning your own home, or let's say no longer being homeless, it may start with incremental targets of first getting them into some kind of a shelter or doubled up somewhere, and ultimately getting them their own apartment or something. I'm not clear that couldn't be handled through goal target, or when that should be handled by 4 separate goals that are bound together.
Great questions, Monique. Never really considered that the use case. I mean, the primary differentiator I can see is what Jay had raised, where you'd like to independently track status and progress of the parts, especially if they might sort of move independently, if you will, and not just be sequenced. But you're right. You could conceivably use multiple targets to plan progression over time.
So I'm very new to FIRE and I don't understand it as much, but there is a possibility where we can do nesting, right, in the goals. So if there is a target goal and there are like multiple goals, can't we put the target goal at the top and then have a nesting for the individual goals? Means
it would still require the relationship, because the
Yeah.
only way to indicate the relationship of, I mean, a nested still is independent unless there's some indication of how they're related.
As far as the target is concerned, it said that it targets observations, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you have an observation, that needs to be something that currently exists. So if you're thinking about, well, my goal is to move into an apartment, then you wouldn't put that as an observation because the patient doesn't currently live in an apartment. So that wouldn't be an observation resource.
Well, it can
That's
be
not
an
something you
it-
observed about the patient.
You mean for target here, but I think the codable concept could just be a finding, and the target, which is a codable concept, could simply be a finding of sheltered housing, a SNOMED code with a Boolean value of true or false by a certain due date.
There's nothing in here that says it has to target an observation that I've seen.
No,
It
I
was
think
it was in the description.
it was in the description, but I don't think they mean observation as in a resource. I think it's
Yeah, I
Observation
think they
like,
mean a finding.
something that you observe, something that you observed. It's more like a verb. Again,
Yeah, I have it all.
a verb rather than an actual resource thing.
lowercase o.
Yeah. But then there's, of course, J, then there comes observations with a big capital O. So I wonder if this, we may have had this as a reference at one time, but when we got rid of the reference, didn't tweak the the description.
Yep.
That's something we can add on our fire call. But we can certainly have, we have a fire call tomorrow at 5 o'clock, so we can always come to that call and ask these questions there as well.
As I collect these things for the dam, it would be useful. I don't know if this stuff exists already or not, but for all of these changes and all of these profiling suggestions and needs, if there were concrete examples of why, what's the use case that this change is supporting, and I know we've said some of those out loud, but if there was like a official list of those things, and as soon as I see this out loud, I'm going to discover that it's already in the IG, but I don't know that. So if that doesn't exist, I would like it to, and if it does,
so usually for the Michelle is very good at capturing the example use cases as we discuss these. If we're going to make a change, you know what I mean, for the the various JIRA tickets. So a lot of times you will find that documented in the JIRA tickets.
Great, thanks.
I can think of one use case is that if the sub target or the sub goal needs to be tracked individually as far as its achievement status or its priority, then just including it as a target of an overall goal would not allow for that.
Okay.
Right.
Unless we added a element under target that simply allowed, to have the due date and then some statement whether it was missed or achieved.
But
then you can run into an issue of nesting becomes a greater and greater issue, because if the sub goal has a sub goal, then are we also going to provide for that in this structure and then have it be able to be tracked individually as well? Or is it more efficient to have a link to other goal resources?
Evaluate the best process procedure when you're done.
Yeah, I think the fact that the assessment is outside that loop is maybe not the clearest, but at least a useful discriminator between the two approaches. And you probably don't want to repeat it unless there's some reason to.
So how would it be handled now with multiple targets as the base resource shows that are possible with multiple due dates? You know, because you could put several things here like weight loss related, and what kind of multiple targets are there that wouldn't still have to be taken into consideration for the overall achievement of the main how do you know when a due date was met, for example, with these multiple targets?
For each one of them, not unless there's a.
Yeah, I mean, even the flaw remains here that I don't know how, for any goal that can have multiple targets, how I see their due dates, but I don't know whether they were met.
So I think if the targets, you know, so for somebody with hip replacement, I keep using this, somebody who's had hip replacement surgery, right? So the target might be for them to be able to climb 5 stairs and be able to walk 10 feet. And they need to be able to do both of those by that due date.
But those would be 2 separately logged targets with 2 separate due dates, I would think, because you can only have one measure per target.
A string and not use a quotable, you know, unless there is a quotable concept that captures both of those.
Yeah, if you wanted to assess them individually, you would make them separate goals. And if you
if you wanted one to climb stairs to be by itself with a due date, then that would be one by itself. And if walk 10 feet by itself, then that would be the second one by itself.
Or maybe there would be 2 different ways of assessing the goal, 2 different targets, and maybe walking 10 feet or climbing 3 stairs would be sufficient.
Is this something that should be specified by profiles?
Okay, yeah. So I think in chat, Laura had asked if there is a model example on this, or should we try to develop one? It might be, it's probably definitely a good idea to have some examples. And I know when we do the profiling, we have to provide examples as well. And I think in the MCC profile today, most of the goal examples are like lab result type examples. I think the goal examples are our lab results type examples. Oh, that's a dietary goal one. Yeah, but those are not very well spelled out. But we would certainly include examples in with the profiling. Okay. Artifact index, the ones that are goals are mostly lab results. Yeah, lab results. These goal ones, like my problem level target ones. And in this one, if I click on XML, JSON, for example, I don't know if that does it. No, that's not the right, that's not what I'm looking for. But we will provide examples as well. It is this measure and on target. You use the quotable concept for the bicarbonate, and then we'll put it in the value element. And for weight loss, what's that, weight loss? There's a body weight target one. On this one, there it uses the goal relationship extension. It does have a target measure, and a slice on it. So these are some of the things that we need to fix and clean up. Oh, we're already past time. Sorry. I'll stop sharing.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for your active engagement. I think MCC is on the patient care work group agenda again on the 27th of April. But yeah, we look forward to continuing these discussions.
Erin, thank you for having us, and it's always a pleasure.
Yes, thank you for coming and swoosh inviting the rest of your
I know.
team.
I sent out the bat signal. It worked.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much, Monique.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.